I called this meeting because we need to save money somehow. I need your ideas. And no, we can't go taxing the rich, and we definitely can't go asking billionaires to pay their fair share. They are there to fund us. They're going to save us after all, right? I need your ideas. What can we do? Well, we can get rid of social safety nets. People will riot. Not if we create an individualistic environment, base people's morality on their health, and peddle eugenics messaging by using people's resentment of COVID precautions to our advantage. That sounds promising. I mean, it is so annoying having to be inclusive anyway. I mean, it's obvious that there are just people that are born better than others. Why can't we have fun anymore? The fight's been on since Trump first got into office with this.
And now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Maybe that's what I said.
That reporter he is talking about is Serge Kovaleski, who now works for the New York Times.
Elon Musk, the billionaire edgelord, was trying to make the arseler come back into fashion on Twitter with posts like this and this. And the use of arseler on Twitter actually tripled because of his influence. It's time to get rid of the woke mind virus of inclusivity. Can't we just get back to understanding that some people are just born better than others? Eugenics was thought of something that enlightened people followed. It was for the intelligent, you see, because eugenics means well-born, aka well-bred. I mean, we do have Charles Darwin's own cousin, Francis Galton, being the creator of it in 1883. Whilst there can be a focus on positive eugenics, all of the well-bred aspects to it, which always so happen to coincide with white supremacy, there's usually been more of a focus on the negative aspects. Think like the start to idiocracy, stupid people are having children and therefore the whole world got really stupid. Sarah Zed actually has this fantastic video on it. It's a few years old now, but I'll link it for you down below in case for some reason you haven't seen it yet. Something which is really hard to deal with that people don't talk about is having intrusive, disturbing thoughts that never stop. It's like having a mosquito in your ear of constant bad things that will happen, and to try and make sure they don't, you have to do particular things, or follow certain processes to make you feel like you're in control. This is what it's like for people with OCD. It's not the fun, quirky, I just like things to be clean, like Monica from Friends was depicted to be. It's a compulsion that you feel out of control of. Often when people with OCD summon the courage to go to therapy, it's not actually helpful because you analyze the thoughts over and over again, which only makes you fixate on them more. The more attention you pay to these thoughts, the worse and more ingrained they become. Or you get told to just replace those thoughts with positive ones. And I can tell you from personal experience, that's like telling someone who's desperately needing to pee to think of a waterfall. So people are often stuck feeling like they're the broken one because they are doing the right thing by going to therapy, but they're not getting any better. And that's where this video's sponsor, NoCD, shines. The specialized therapy they provide is ERP, Exposure and Response Prevention. NoCD is the world's leading provider of OCD treatment because their therapists are specially trained by world-renowned experts in OCD treatment. You won't get a standard cookie-cutter therapist here. You get someone who genuinely understands all the issues that OCD creates, even ones you may not have realized have been dictating your life and are because of OCD. And they want you to find a therapist you genuinely work well with, as opposed to feeling like you're stuck with one. Feeling like a square peg in a round hole. NoCD works with lots of major insurance plans to make therapy accessible. It's easy to get started because their team is here to help rather than make life harder. If you're feeling trapped on a loop because your thoughts keep you struggling through life, NoCD is a great option to help. Check out their website, nocd.com, which is linked for you down below, and book a call with them now. That's nocd.com. Thanks NoCD for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. Eugenicists believe that the following undesirable characteristics were almost exclusively hereditary: intellectual disability, mental illness, alcoholism, poverty, criminality, and various types of, quote, immoral behavior, including prostitution. The emphasis on a link between intellectual disability and criminality, and the consequent, quote, menace which intellectual disability posed to society. And eugenics movements across the world have tried to find different ways of assuring that undesirable people aren't procreating and creating more undesirables. Through doing things like sexual sterilization, marriage prohibition, segregation, and institutionalism. Once again, eugenics was cool. This was something that progressive people took part in. Doctors, even feminists. Like Nellie McClung in Canada, who argued that women were the mothers and guardians of their race. They therefore championed legislation including sterilization, which aimed to curtail prostitution, alcoholism, and, quote, mental defectiveness. Yikes on trikes. The Catholic Church was against it, but not for the same reasons that we're against it. You know, it's more because they wanted, you know, God's will to come to fruition. In Canada, very similar to the goals in the USA, they really wanted to have Anglo-Saxon Protestants, you know, breeding more. And to, quote, discourage or limit reproduction by undesirables, you know, Eastern Europeans or Indigenous people. We have talked about this in the Sydney Sweeney video, I'm sure that you're remembering this. So much so that in 1928 a law was enacted in Alberta, Canada, the Sexual Sterilisation Act, which authorised the sterilisation of individuals who had been institutionalised. This was in effect for 44 years. The Eugenics Board approved 4,725 cases and 2,834 were carried out. It was only in 1996 that Leilani Moya, who was wrongly sterilised when she was only 14 years old, was awarded $740,000 in damages, and there have been hundreds more people who have settled out of court. By 1972, First Nations and Métis people represented over 25% of those sterilised under Alberta's sexual sterilisation legislation, and even though those acts were repealed, Indigenous women have been coerced into getting sterilisation. In the decade of the 1970s alone, it's estimated there were 1,200 Indigenous women sterilised. And even recently, a 2017 report uncovered that there were Indigenous women who were being coerced into sexual sterilisation. But nobody quite beats the USA when it comes to eugenics though. I mean, other than the obvious one, but they took heavy inspiration from the US. The US loves the idea of the Aryan race because it fits so well in with American exceptionalism. Big business tycoons funded eugenics efforts, like the Rockefellers. And Kellogg, the cereal guy, he helped to fund the Race Betterment Foundation. There was a huge eugenics movement in the USA. Even Margaret Sanger, you know, the feminist behind Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist. She wanted women to be able to choose if they have children, which is a great thing, right? We are all here for bodily autonomy. But she advocated for people who had mental illnesses or physical disabilities to not have children. Plus, she was a major racist who supported a bill to sterilise African Americans. People may wonder why I point out the issues of the waves of feminism of the past, but it's really important to recognise the issues along with the progress which has been made. If your feminism isn't intersectional, I don't want it. In 1907, the world's first eugenics policy went into effect in Indiana. The act to prevent the procreation of confirmed criminals, idiots, imbeciles, and the states of Washington, Connecticut, and California followed suit. The Nazis praised the USA in their 1934 handbook. Laws which prevented interracial marriage from happening were only repealed in 1967, and they were put in place to, you know, keep the blood pure. Better baby contests were really popular to show off, like, how well bred your child was. America was the land of eugenics. It's only because of World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust that eugenics had to kind of, like, get taken off its pedestal a bit, but the beliefs still are so prevalent amongst society. The sentiment of healthy and normal being an indicator of someone's goodness has sadly stuck around. I think about it even today. People being able to fend off illness is seen as this great moral accomplishment of them. Companies have even given people gifts for not taking any sick days. You know, like, this stuff is so ingrained in society, I sometimes think that people don't quite realize it until it's pointed out. The solution to your problem is simple. We need to make people be scared of disabled people and want to shut them away. Bring back othering, am I right? All of this woke nonsense is making people humanize each other. It's so boring. Wait, do you mean like rolling back civil rights? Won't people worry about that? Won't people like get concerned and start to riot about that? Who cares? It was so annoying when the ugly laws got repealed in 1974 and we had to see the uggos all out and about again, right? I mean, we had to tolerate them, give them jobs, have protections in place for them. Ugh. Things were just better when people were institutionalized, so then we didn't have to see them. Hey, write that down. We should bring that back. Can we make that happen again? Look, let's face it, none of us want to see any of these freaks. Institutionalization of people with mental health issues is not in so many horror stories for no reasons. Like, those places have been turned into places to terrify people for that exact reason. Institutionalization of people is a great way to be able to control the masses because you can threaten with locking them away at this place where you have to prove that you are normal enough to get out of. And this was something which was particularly weaponized against women in the 18th to early 20th centuries. Women were institutionalized if they didn't comply with strict patriarchal rules. And there were financial incentives to get people to do this maliciously as well. Before the Married Women's Property Act in 1882 came into effect, all of a woman's possessions went straight to her husband. And if you just didn't like your daughter, you couldn't get her married, you could send her off to one of these asylums as well.
Oh, that is despicable. I love it.
It was a way to keep women submissive, and we also need to remember that lobotomies were mostly performed on women in order to be able to subdue them. Like, people with epilepsy were commonly institutionalized too, or they were sent to work in the poorhouse. It was only in the 1950s that medication started to become available to people to help with seizures. In Germany, the government, specifically the CDU along with the AfD, the right-wing parties, are currently trying to make changes to the Medical Services Act to create a registry of people who have mental health problems, like make a list. This is using the excuse that people with mental illness are a danger to themselves and others. And in order to do this, they're using the scapegoat of a mentally ill asylum seeker who killed 2 people through a stabbing in January of this year. Because of course there is a huge racist and nationalist angle to this too. You're seeing a similar situation happen in the USA right now. About a month ago, Carlos Brown killed a Ukrainian refugee, Anya Sarutska, on a train. He had 14 prior convictions of violent crime and was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was actually repeatedly houseless. He couldn't live with his mum anymore because she kicked him out because she couldn't cope with his violence. The thing that you'll notice when you look into the case is his mother and sister noticed a significant difference in him after he got released from police custody in 2020. He believed that police had implanted material in him which was telling him what to do, how to walk, how to talk, everything. And he kept on calling the police up, struggling with this, asking for help, saying that this material was making him do everything, and instead of organising help, he got punished. And things kept getting worse and worse. His mother kept on trying to get help, but due to capacity issues, that wasn't possible. The system is built to imprison people rather than to support them. There were multiple opportunities over the years to prevent this utter tragedy from happening. We all agree this should never have happened. Now, with this case, politicians on the right and the left are calling for more police to be on the ground. And of course, that people need to be locked up. Whereas what we're actually seeing is a system that completely abandons people who have mental illnesses unless they are criminalizing them and locking them up. And when it comes to the US in particular, this really helps a for-profit prison system. And this report came out just 6 days ago from the Prison Policy Initiative, which shows 43% of people in state prisons have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and since admittance, 66% did not receive any mental health care. Prison is not a safe home for people with mental health issues. It's become like a modern-day institutionalization solution, one which disproportionately locks up black and brown people. We are sadly seeing the symptoms of a broken system which is ending up in completely avoidable tragedy. And this is being pounced on as an opportunity to demonize houseless and disabled people, to make the public see people as others, as evil. Like, Trump even went to go on and say this:
deranged monster who was roaming free after 14 prior arrests. We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand. Tragedies
like this are avoidable. There is money there which could be used to support people. However, the will to care is not. Houseless people are more likely to suffer from mental illness and disabilities. And would you look at exactly what Trump is doing? He is criminalizing homelessness right now. We saw him roll out the National Guard in Washington, D.C. to this effect. But where do the houseless go? Is he doing like a housing first sort of initiative? No, of course he's not. He wants them to go into long-term institutions and hospitals, basically lock people up and make disabled people invisible to the wider world. And when you make people invisible, that's where you get horrific things happening. Like, institutions get a bad rep for a reason because there was so much abuse which happened there. In Germany, this fear is being used to get doctors to effectively out their patients to the police, so that these lists can be created, which is a total breach of doctor-patient confidentiality. And it just makes people more unsafe. Once again, disabled people are more likely to be abused. It just makes people more unsafe. Like, the police aren't trained as mental health practitioners. They don't know what to do. It's literally part of criminalizing it. Research here in Aotearoa just came out showing police bias towards disabled people who are more likely to be stopped by police, have force used against them, and ultimately end up in the courts and justice system even when they've done nothing wrong. You will find case after case of police using brutal force against disabled people. like Tyron McAlpin, who was beaten despite being completely innocent. Recently, Victor Perez was killed because of police using deadly force against him. And when disabled people try to contact the police for help, they are completely infantilized. And this ultimately leaves people more vulnerable. And of course, there's an intersectional aspect to this too, as this report shows. Despite representing only 20% of the population in the United States, people with disabilities make up to 30 to 50% of individuals subject to police use of force. An estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of people by police are people with disabilities, and more than half of African Americans with disabilities have been arrested by the age of 28, which is double the number of their white counterparts. Another report has found that police enable violence and exploitation against people with disabilities. So very clearly, more police on the ground is not the answer, but that's the solution which politicians around the world keep on coming up with. May I remind you once again that disabled people were the guinea pigs for the gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And it's really important to remember what counts as a disability and what counts as a mental illness, and who exactly it is that determines this. As Blair Amani from Crutches and Spice reminds us often, disability is not determined by the individual, but from others' observations.
But the last clause is, as perceived by others as having such an impairment. When people who are undesirable to have children all wind up in those internment camps that they're building. Y'all are gonna be shocked. You're gonna be, what happened? Nobody ever meant that,
That can sound so harmless, right? Like the doctor's going to determine if you're disabled or if you've got a mental illness or something. That's totally fine until you actually look at the history and see the abuse which has happened in the institutionalization of people. Remember, it was only in 1973 that the American Psychiatric Association said that being homosexual was no longer a mental disorder. People were being sent to institutions to be cured of this illness of homosexuality. It was a legit crime. And you can see from the way that LGBTQIA+ folk are being treated today as if they're committing crimes, as if they are evil, as if they're nefarious and not to be trusted. Like, people are treating them as if they're mentally ill and need to be cured by similar methods. Think about the whole woke mind virus is out to get you. One of my patrons is raising the alarm bell from what's happening in Germany right now. The AfD parliamentary group has announced a bill to repeal the law on self-determination with regard to gender registration. This undoes people's ability to self-determine their gender, citing, of course, that it's a danger to women and children. It's the same BS excuse that I've already discussed here and here. By making lists of people who have self-determined their gender, this is effectively outing them. This is on open official government documentation. Previously, that older documentation would still be held by government, but it would be classified, whereas this opens it up. And considering how hostile people are becoming towards LGBTQIA+ people, this just puts people directly in harm's way. And we know nothing good comes from making lists of marginalized people. Like, remember the UK determining that a woman was a biological woman? This harkens back to anything other than the gender binary. Anything other than straight is devious, evil, not to be trusted. It's criminal. Of course, despite the fact that statistics do not back this up. Ableism, racism, transphobia, homophobia all coexist very neatly under the umbrella of eugenics. And it's really important that I show you how intersectional all of this is. Labeling someone as mentally ill in an environment which is hostile to people that don't fit is like putting a target on their back. As is brilliantly written in this Guardian piece, play-by-play is always the same. Social media follower takes their marching orders, hurling discontent at the specified targets and regurgitating talking points. Eventually, the ideas become so ubiquitous they're adapted by politicians who then use them to engage their base. Finally, the talking point becomes the policy itself, and politicians claim they have a mandate from the people to justify stripping away the rights of the marginalized. We can make people happy that public funding is being taken away because we can get them to distrust science to begin with. I mean, they don't know what chemicals are being put into things. Think of little Timmy, and think about all of the money that these nasty pharmaceutical companies are making. But wait a second, isn't the global wellness industry worth far more than the global pharmaceutical industry? According to this report, in November 2024, it's worth $6.3 trillion, projected to get to $9 billion by 2028. But the global pharmaceutical industry is only worth $1.6 trillion. Like, wellness is worth 4 times that of pharmaceuticals. Shh, we don't want people doing maths. Think about all of the businesses that can take advantage of the unregulated supplement market and make heaps of money. Don't you like businesses succeeding? Getting people to mistrust vaccines means that they'll spend more money at these businesses. And capitalism means that the best wins out in the end, right? We love to support small business owners, but how do we get people comfortable with disease rising and mortality rates going up? I mean, especially when deaths are preventable. I mean, won't vulnerable people be affected by social safety net cuts? Oh, who cares about them? Make health a personal choice and market it as freedom. COVID is completely unavoidable when it comes to this conversation because once COVID hit, there has been a noticeable uptick in ableist attitudes towards people. And it was even shown in this study when it comes to the treatment of disabled people during the first different waves of coronavirus. Healthcare rationing starts first by discriminating against disabled people, which at the start of COVID meant that disabled people had their ventilators given away and given to people who had COVID because it was determined that the disabled person's quality of life wasn't good enough, so they went to the COVID patient instead. And it wasn't the disabled person who determined whether their quality of life was good or not. No, it was the doctor that did this, and this resulted in people dying. We saw really early on very influential folk like Joe Rogan saying that people should be healthy and then they don't need the vaccine, and bringing on person after person who was a conspiracy theorist who didn't actually know what the hell they were talking about and spreading all sorts of misinformation to millions of people. There was a staunch uprising against public health initiatives, a distrust of the government, and a resentment for people who were elderly, disabled, or who had an autoimmune disease because they were being asked to think of others before themselves. Think of these, quote, weaker people. And this is where health and morality really mix together to create this toxic concoction. Because yes, we can all agree it's best if people strive to have a healthy life. There's so many benefits to exercise and to eating in a way that's healthy that suits you and your body. But if people are unhealthy, disabled, or have existing conditions or are elderly, that doesn't make them any less worthy of life though, does it?
Yeah, people are gonna die. It's just terrible, but inevitable?
I miss the days when that was an unpopular sentiment for people to have, as opposed to it seems like the norm now. As time carried on from the start of COVID, this individualism and health is wealth sort of mentality really took hold. You're responsible for yourself. You can't go looking at all of the other factors which play into the health of a person, all of the external factors. No. That's you and your own personal failing. Alongside this attitude of, I don't owe anybody anything. It's these sorts of mentalities that completely erode community. I spoke about these issues more in my COVID video and also in my Crunchy to Alt-Right Pipeline video. If someone isn't the perfect picture of health, very much emphasis on picture because people don't really care if someone skinny isn't healthy, they just care about how they look healthy. If someone does get really sick from COVID, they're seen as this gross failure of this whole survival of the fittest mindset, which has really taken hold. It's people are seen as defective, almost criminal if they don't fit the wellness mold. And we're seeing the very real ramifications of this today with the downplaying of COVID, the downplaying of long COVID, and the downplaying of millions of people who lost their lives to it, and the fact that COVID waves are still happening right now. We are still in COVID times. There are so many countries that don't even recognize long COVID as a disability, including here in Aotearoa. Okay, what if we just make accessing social safety nets incredibly hard for all of the people that rely on them? I mean, Jesus wasn't vaccinated and he survived, right? Other than the whole, And besides, it's God's plan when someone goes. And anyway, if they took better care of themselves, then they wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. Why make it everybody else's problem? Why should others have to pay for lazy people? Yeah, it's not the state's responsibility to look after the well-being of people. What are we, communists? Everything has a price. You know what's really annoying? Accessibility. It just gets in the way.
Just go away with half the screen during these emergency briefings to the sign language interpreters. I have nothing against, obviously, people that cannot hear, but there's closed captioning. This is just over the top. We can't do this. We got to get back to how it used to be. It's just too much. It's a distraction, is what it is.
Following from Charlie Kirk saying that, Christopher Rufo, another right-wing figure, tweeted, "I'm sorry, but we have to stop with the ridiculous sign language interpreters who turn serious press conferences into a farce." make you think they're doing a TikTok dance when they're actually communicating with people. And Richard Hanania, the right-wing commentator who previously wrote for white supremacist websites under a pseudonym, jumped on this saying that the process has been captured by the disability lobby. Oh yeah, there's real big money behind disability, right? Like, big disability is out here to get you. They're all lobbying away. It's like there is no money to be made from disability advocacy. As has been illustrated, the world is not exactly kind to disabled people. 1 in 4 people in the US, or 68 million people, have at least one disability. But there's a really prevalent idea that disability isn't normal. As the Center for American Progress writes in this incredible piece, which I highly recommend you read all the way through, in the first 6 months of Trump's second term, he has done as much as possible to try and dismantle any disability access. His very first action when he got into office was to undo diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've even gotten rid of ASL interpretation during press briefings and all throughout the White House. The administration has also harmed the disability community by removing the federal government's ability to enforce disability civil rights laws, undermining healthcare affordability and access for disabled people, destroying public health infrastructure that protects and supports the health and well-being of disabled people, stripping the ability of disabled children to receive free, appropriate public education, slashing services, benefits, and regulations that help keep disabled people in their communities, decreasing disability protections in employment, through DOGE slashing staff through multiple sectors of government, in particular those concerning civil rights. Protections for the disability community have been vanishing. Slashing these crucial offices leave few, if any, staff to enforce civil rights laws. And as we know from the big, beautiful bill, approximately 15 million Americans are going to be without medical insurance. And in the country where you have to pay to basically breathe, this is almost like signing these people to just... And as we know, RFK Jr. is just so hell-bent on making autism this big boogeyman. He is constantly spreading disinformation about it.
Autism destroys families. These are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date.
We remember when RFK Jr. wanted to make a list of people with autism to try and find the root cause of it. He wants to eradicate autism. And I'm sorry, but when you're trying to make lists of people with autism and then you're saying about eradication, I get nervous. I mean, heck, we could just look at the Kennedy's family history with the treatment of Rosemary Kennedy in particular. That will show you how at risk people are if they don't fit into American exceptionalism. It's akin to Alex Clark saying this, as you'll remember from the Womanosphere video.
Today, a newborn child has a 1 in 36 chance that he or she will be autistic. And that rate is also rising every year. Who cares about politics if the next generation is dead or close to it before they can even vote?
There is such a hatred for autistic people, it's actually really scary. And RFK Jr. is now convinced that the cause of autism is hidden in Tylenol, which is one of the only pain medications which is safe for pregnant women to take, by the way. And this huge study was conducted just last year, which found absolutely no correlation between Tylenol, autism, ADHD, or intellectual disability. But at the very same time as wasting resources and fear-mongering about autism, he has slashed funding to the FDA, which is something which does ensure the safety of the American people. Suspending quality control for food testing directly puts people's lives at risk, and it also makes you understand why people like to try and cling on to the whole survival of the fittest thing, as they're trying to get rid of all of these safety nets. It's like, well, if you can't survive your raw milk, maybe you shouldn't be on the earth. He's also cancelled $500 million for funding for mRNA vaccines, which are not just used for COVID. The dude doesn't even convince that people's lives were saved from the COVID-19 vaccine. There's this great piece from AP News which goes into debunking everything that was said during that Senate hearing. And Legion Miller has already done this video about the COVID vaccine, which I'll have linked for you down below. And Democracy Now! Has also got a video about that whole Senate hearing. All of this is fitting in far too well with Trump's plans, as he's wasting millions of dollars to change the Department of Defense to be the Department of War. And I really want you to hear what Pete Hegseth is saying just here, because you may have missed this.
We're going to go on offense, not just on defense. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct.
And just yesterday, as of filming, the Supreme Court ruled that racial profiling can actually be done by ICE agents. That's completely fine to be able to do their job. So you can see why people like Senator Joni Ernst feel completely comfortable saying something like this when it comes to Medicaid cuts.
They are not eligible, so they will be coming off. So people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks.
And then she doubled down saying this when she faced backlash.
Made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well.
Is she in a graveyard? Did she film this in a graveyard to make her point even more apparent? I feel like I'm watching Miss Fieldmouse and Thumbelina.
They're dead. Dead. Very, very dead.
And it's happened through history. You first start by targeting disabled people and the elderly, people that society has often deemed to be a burden on society. And you're going to see a lot more of this messaging about people being lazy, people being entitled, people being a burden. And they also use phrases like that on posters during the height of eugenics.
To mental health and the homeless population, a lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection.
Yeah. And all of this, of course, ties in with Project 2025. And I was checking on the tracker yesterday. They're still at about 47% of the way done. Yay! It's weird to look at the things that they still want to achieve, and here's just a few of them. Limit the CDC's role to evaluating only health-related costs and benefits of interventions without considering any social impacts. I wonder why you don't want to consider social impacts of things, huh? Rescind the Equity in IDEA, Individuals and Disabilities Education Act regulations, targeting disabled children, gotcha. Rescind Medicare coverage for gender reassignment surgery, targeting trans people, again. Require all schools that receive federal funding to give students the military entrance test. A terrifying picture is being created, one of compliance and cruelty, of survival of the fittest, a real eugenics mindset, which is enforced by children who then have to take the military entrance exam. Of course, this is not just in the USA. The UK is becoming like almost a mini USA in some ways. The benefit reforms which are happening in the UK are coming from a work-first priority, making it harder for people with less severe disabilities to get benefits. Extra benefit payments for health conditions will also be frozen for current claimants and nearly halved for new applicants. And they're doing this during the time of a cost of living crisis. The changes are due to come into action in April 2026, and charities and disability advocates are incredibly concerned about this, understandably. Despite what some people think and despite what propaganda will tell you, getting disability benefits is not easy. Anybody who is on disability benefits will be able to tell you that. The UK is a country which has prided itself on the NHS, like on universal healthcare. But as time has gone on, there has been a strong privatisation push in the UK, with many services being cut to be able to meet the budget cuts which NHS bosses are demanding. All of these cuts mean that private healthcare becomes the new norm. And all you have to do is glance over to the USA to know that that doesn't help anybody. And why stop at disabled people? We need more taxpayers, don't we, if we can't tax the rich? Do you mean children? Sure, them, whatever. We need to get control of the women again, okay? We need to take away their bodily autonomy and make it so that they are the problem, and market that to men so men resent them. And at the same time, make it so women have to rely on them so that we, the state, don't have to look after them anymore. I mean, my grandparents never got divorced. That's because she couldn't have any financial freedom without him. And any time that he abused her, that didn't count as abuse because it wasn't legally defined as that way back then. And right now, we've got a president saying this.
A man has a little fight with the wife. They say this was a crime, see? So now I can't claim 100%.
It's like my job is being done for me. And nobody's going to catch on to us because we can also make immigrants the problem as well. It's not the fact that abuse towards women is still happening by our men. No. We paint others as the problem. It's the brown people making our women and children unsafe and taking our jobs and also leeching off us. Hey now, this is what dreams are made of. But I might be getting ahead of myself because maybe that's for next time. Everything is interconnected, and hopefully now you understand more historical context for why I'm bringing all of this stuff up and why disability advocates have been waving red flags for a long time now. Making the world more accessible actually makes life better for everybody. Texting was invented to help deaf people communicate, and now it's people's preferred method of communication. Try and call a millennial, they're like, there's something deadly wrong, why are you calling me? Audiobooks, the thing which has enabled me to read so many books for these videos, was created to help blind people be able to read. And if you want free access to audiobooks, I highly recommend the Libby app. It partners with your local library, so then you can access all of their audiobooks. And if you're also trying to avoid anything related to Bezos, I use the audiobooks app. I'm not sponsored, I don't get any kickbacks, I'm just saying the resources that I use. Inventions like Siri and Alexa were designed with disabled people in mind so that people could ask questions and organize things hands-free. Curb cuts, those dips that happen in the pavement? Those were designed for disabled people to begin with, but it makes life so much easier for anyone who's pushing a pram, pushing a trolley, pushing anything. Centering accessibility improves everybody's lives. So this shunning of people and eugenics coming back into fashion is only going to make life worse for everybody. All of us, if we're lucky enough to live a long enough life, will become disabled. And the thing is, they won't stop at making disabled people's lives worse. They just start there because we've been trained through everyday ableism to devalue people who are disabled. And I brought this up with my patrons as well because everyday eugenics is far more common than you may actually think. It presents in your everyday life, even when you're trying to be super nice. You know how people always feel really entitled to every bit of information about a pregnant person, regardless of how much or how little they know them? People often ask, oh, are you having a boy or a girl? And the pregnant person doesn't always know that information or want to give that information to whoever this person is that is really fixated, strangely, on a baby's genitals. So the common phrase to say is, oh, I don't mind as long as they're healthy. This is completely innocuous, right? However, it's the as long as prefix which makes this into a bit of an issue. Is eugenics hiding in plain sight in the same way that parents just expect their child to be normal, aka straight, and aka able-bodied, healthy, no mental illnesses or anything? A mother shared on Reddit about this phrase saying, I learned at 20 weeks that my baby will not be healthy, as he has a congenital heart defect. It can be treated and the prognosis for a good quality of life is hopeful, but it's something he will have to manage his entire life. Obviously, I wish he were healthy, but whenever I hear, as long as the baby's healthy, it makes me feel so much guilt and shame and sadness about my medically complicated baby. My husband and I love him just as much as we would otherwise. What happens if the baby isn't healthy? You wouldn't love them any less just because of that, right? I propose that we change this phrase to be, whoever they are, I can't wait to meet them. It's a nice simple closer, it keeps everybody happy, it avoids confrontation, which is kind of the main reason that people came up with the whole as long as they're healthy line to begin with, right? Because you kind of don't really want to have this conversation where someone's asking about your unborn baby's genitals. Governments are trying to do anything they can to make it so that rich people don't have to pay their fair share of taxes, and it's hurting the general population in order to be able to do that. They're painting the peasants as a problem whilst regurgitating these same eugenics messages which have been prevalent for many years. We need to keep on pressuring our governments to make sure that human rights do stay in place, to not roll back progress, and to most importantly get involved in your local community, get to know your neighbours. We all say that we want to live in a village, right? But you have to participate in that village for it to be able to be a village. Demonizing disabled people only allows for violence to happen to them, as history has clearly taught us. And taking away social safety nets is effectively like telling people that they should die because they don't belong. And I think if you made it all the way to the end of this video, that you agree with me that this shouldn't be happening. If you made it all the way to the end and you don't know what else to say, please leave the black heart emoji. And thanks once again to NoCD for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check out their website down below at nocd.com and book a free call. Once again, thanks to my patrons for voting for this topic because it's a very important one, and I really hope that this video has gotten boosted, and commenting, sharing, liking, that all really does help massively in increasing this video's reach. Extra special thank you to my top tier Trash Panda enablers: Baguette, Carrie Quake, Danielle, Emberly McCulley, Jamisa Brown, Jeff Boyardee, Cole, Laura Bell, Mayanaka Midnighter, Megan Connolly, Mila Gautier, Nathan, Nicole H, Ryder, Spooky Jade, Tammy Poitres, Tonya Banier, Farouk Catmama, and Zofima. I know I didn't do any baking this week, but I'm actually struggling with a terrible migraine right now, so this was more than I can actually handle, so I'm going to be in the dark for the rest of the day. So here's some bloopers instead, if you did make it all the way to the end. Not if we create an individualistic environment. Things were just better when people were institutional.